Folks, here we go. Great to have everybody on today. We got Zoom, we got Facebook Live. Other folks will be joining us. We're going to get going here because we do these meetings once a month on the 30th of each month. And it's really an open forum Q&A about anything related to the afterlife. So people can bring whatever questions you want here. And I have a couple of questions for people sent me via Facebook message or email or texted to me or whatever. And we'll get to those in a few minutes. My name's Kelvin Chin. And as I said, we do this on the 30th of every month at the same time. So doing these, this particular monthly session at 12 p.m. Pacific time, which is 3 p.m. Eastern time, and so forth. You kind of do the time zone calculations depending on where you are on planet Earth. So great to have everybody on today. We're going to talk today. It depends on, as I said, it's an open forum, so you can ask any questions. But sometimes what I do, it depends on the month, but sometimes I'll talk about a specific topic, a specific question or topic or something, just to kind of kickstart the discussion. But the discussion does not only have to revolve around whatever I happen to talk about, open the discussion up with that particular month. So really, when I say open forum, I really mean open forum. You can ask anything about anything related to afterlife in these sessions. But today, I thought I'd talk about this notion of good and evil because it is pretty widespread out there, and in the spiritual communities, let's just say, it's a pretty widespread notion, concept, belief system amongst a lot of people. And I want to debunk this a little bit. So those of you who have not seen me talk about stuff before, I am the guy who wants to demystify mystical stuff. So there's a lot of mystical stuff out there, especially in the spiritual world, spiritual community and so forth, communities around the world, spiritual groups and so forth. I want to demystify this stuff because if we really understand what's going on here on planet Earth, that the seen and the unseen here on planet Earth, or if you want to talk about the afterlife or heaven or whatever you want to call the afterlife after we biologically die, if you really understand it, I think it can be explained in a very rational, common sense, reasonable way. And so that's what I try to do in all my classes. So those of you who haven't been in any of my classes before. But this notion of good and evil is pretty widespread. And first, let me just say, I want to talk about good and evil from a spiritual standpoint. I am not talking about, for example, I'm not talking about it from a social or a political standpoint. Any of that stuff, we leave that at the door. We're not talking about that here in these sessions, okay? So, we're not talking about the criminal justice system. We're not talking about good and evil in that way, okay? Yeah, people do bad stuff, and there's bad behavior, and there's stuff that we consider good behavior, but I want to talk about it more kind of globally, if you will. We kind of go 100,000 foot, if you know that expression, and I want to talk about the concepts of good and evil. We're not talking about what I sometimes refer to as guardrails that we may choose to have socially. Oh, yeah, killing people, not a good thing, all right? Bad thing. Yeah, I'm not talking about that here now. So, the notion of good and evil, first of all, you think about it, the way most people think of good and evil, they're talking about it or thinking about it from an absolute standpoint. There's a belief system that there's some absolute rule. That's good and that's evil. All right? Or that's good and that's bad. But, the phrase in the spiritual communities typically used is good and evil, right? Um, and sometimes people refer to these as forces. First of all, let's dispense with that idea. There's no good and evil forces. There's no forces in the universe. There's only minds. There are forces that are inanimate forces. So I'm not saying there are no forces. There are no forces that are controlling other people's behavior. That's what I mean when I say there are no forces that are controlling other people's behavior. There are minds that try to control other people's behavior, but those are minds. So I'm not talking about some inanimate good evil force idea. So what we're talking about is the notion that if there is some good and evil idea, people assume that there's an absolute good and an absolute evil. And that makes no sense logically if you think about it. I mean, think about just the concept of temperature. And by the way, I'm going to open this up to more open discussion in terms of open forum. I'm only going to talk for about 15 minutes. This is not a long lecture here. I'm just throwing concepts at you here and ideas and try to debunk this a little bit. First, just think about temperature, hot and cold. What is hot and cold? Yes, we have dials on our faucets in our showers and tubs that say hot and cold. But is there an absolute hot and cold? No, you control that at your hot water heater. You didn't know that if you live in an apartment or a condominium complex. Somebody is controlling that temperature at your hot water heater. They're controlling how hot the hot water can get. And usually they do it so that and I think in most states, maybe all states, there's state laws where they control it so that it can't go above 100 and something degrees. I don't know what the temperature is, so that people can't kill themselves by accident by scalding themselves in hot water that's too hot, right? So it's relative is the point. Temperature is hot. What's hot and what's cold? Look, what's our body temperature? Most people, 98.6 or something like that is the general human body temperature. And different animals have different body temperatures, but let's just talk about humans. So 98.6, my body temperature is a little lower. My normal is, I think, 98, 97.4, 97.5. That's my normal. It's always that when I'm normal, when I go get checked up at the doctor's. But let's just use the 98.6 general human temperature, body temperature. Well, when your body temperature goes to 99, you feel like you have a fever, right? That's hot. When when your body temperature goes down to whatever, 70, you feel cold. 60, the air temperature goes down to 50 or 40 or 30. Most of us are feeling cold, especially those of us who live in Southern California. It doesn't have to go down that far. We feel really cold, right? It's relative. What if our body temperature, the normal human body temperature, was 120 degrees? 98.6 would feel freezing cold to us, 25 to whatever the math is. 22, 23, 22 degrees colder, that would feel really cold to us. There is no absolute as it relates to that. And good and evil are very, very similar. And some people will say things like, well, you know what's good when you see it or you feel it. Really? Really? How many times have you heard someone say something simple like, yeah, I'll do that? I came up with 4 different tones that convey very different meanings for those 4 words. If you read those words, yeah, I'll do that, you would think that that was a very positive statement. That was like an agreement that somebody's agreeing to do something, right? If you read it. But what if they said it, first, if they said it like this, yeah, I'll do that. That's a tone of agreement. And it's a fairly kind tone, right? What if they said, yeah, I'll do that? You know, that's kind of a mean tone. Does that really sound like somebody who is agreeing to do something, or are they being forced to do it, right? What if there's somebody said, yeah, I'll do that? It kind of has a little bit of a sensual tone to it, right? Or what if somebody said, yeah, I'll do that. That then there's uncertainty. It's like, they're agreeing to do something, but they're not really sure about what it is, right? Different tones convey different things. It's the same thing. Which is the right way to say the words, yeah, I'll do that? Which is the right way? There's no right and wrong about that. It depends, right? So it's the same thing with good and evil. And the notion of good and evil also implies something else. It implies something else. It implies that somebody's judging. There's a judge who's saying, yeah, that's good and that's evil. That's right and that's wrong. Okay? And usually, I think most people would agree that that implies that somebody or that some being is all-knowing. Because how can you trust a being to tell you what's good and evil or what's right and wrong if they're not all-knowing? So I think most people would agree. But can any being be all-knowing, know everything? Omniscient is a word that's often used. And I would argue that no, because all-knowing means you know everything. And logically, you could debunk that just by simply saying, knowing everything means that you also know what it's like to know nothing. And if you think about that and you wrap your mind around that, you realize that it's a logical impossibility that anybody would know everything about everything, because they'd have to know what it's like to know nothing. And if they know nothing, then where are you? All right. So you could have beings who know a lot more than others. And that's true here on planet Earth. It's true on the other side too, I would argue. But all-knowing, I don't think so. The other big, huge problem you have with all-knowing, this notion of, oh yeah, but there's got to be somebody who knows everything, is that it totally takes off the table that there's free will. Because all-knowing and saying this is absolutely good and this is absolutely evil, or this is right and this is wrong, means that somebody else you don't have free will. You don't have free will means what? Free will means decision-making ability to say no. And if you've ever been with a 2-year-old, you know that we all have the ability to say no. even if it's not in your best interest, you can say no, right? You don't always say, we're not always, and I'm not perfect about this either. So we all can make mistakes. That's part of our free will ability, right? And the last point I'm going to leave you with is this, and then we'll open it up to quick Q&A. If you believe that there is good and evil, all of those points that I just raised cascade down to another point, which is no choice to disagree. That's what I just said. Only can comply. Only can follow the rules. Only can comply. Only can agree to what is good and evil, and who's somebody who says that that's good and what's good and what's evil. And what is that? That's one word. That's obedience. That's the notion of obedience. And I'll leave you this one thought. The way I view obedience is a vice. It's not a virtue. All right? I'm going to leave you hanging with that because in my second, this is a marketing jumping off point for me. On the first Sunday of every month, I'm going to start doing a free monthly session, not about the afterlife and not about death and dying, but about living life. And it's called Living More Happily, the Living More Happily Monthly Forum. And I'm going to talk for about as long as I did today, 15, 20 minutes at the beginning of each of those sessions. And I'm going to lay out a concept about living life and how to live life more happily. And then we're going to have an open discussion for the next 45 minutes or so each month. I'm doing about an hour long. We'll see how long the Q&A goes. I haven't started doing this yet. The first one's going to be the first Sunday in May, which I think, our first Sunday in May, is May 5th. And it's going to be at, the first Sunday in May, May 5th, and then the first Sunday in June, and so forth and so on. First Sunday of each month, and I'll be doing it 10 in the morning Pacific time. So 10 in the morning Pacific time, 1 in the afternoon Eastern time, etc., around the world. Okay? The first one I'm going to talk about is happiness. That's the subject I'm going to talk about. Since we're talking about living more happily, I'm going to talk about what I mean by happiness. And we're going to open it up for discussion. That'll be May 5th. And then whatever the first Sunday in June is, I'm going to talk about obedience. I'm going to talk about this notion of obedience and how obedience is a vice, not a virtue. Okay? And why I think that's the case. Slippery slope. All right? You know what that expression is. Okay. So, open it up for discussion today. Questions? Anything about what I said already today about good and evil, or anything you want to say about ask about anything relating to afterlife stuff? Anything? Yeah. Marlene.
Yeah, I just wanted to throw this out there.
Hold on, Marlene. This is a very strange thing because I don't know what it says on yours.
I'm under William.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
I just changed your name. I just changed your name to your name. Yeah.
Like a little easier.
That is very weird, isn't it?
Yeah.
Okay. So now you have your name. I don't know how William Baldridge. Now, there's somebody else here that has William Baldridge's name. William Baldridge.
I see that.
Who is that? Whose name? I'm going to change your name before we get to your question. Do you see there's a woman who's definitely not William Baldridge. Do you see? Can you see that? Woman with glasses. What's your name?
With the yellow curtain?
Yeah, the yellow curtain behind you. What's your name? I'll change it. I can change your name. You got to unmute yourself. Unmute.
Okay. Yeah, I thought I saw my name there. That's weird.
What is your name?
Stuff going on here,
Oh,
Kelvin.
it's Sharon Shigoyan.
Oh, that's Sharon. Hold on. Hold
Uh-huh.
on, Sharon. I'm going to rename you. This is really strange, Brian, right?
There's some strange stuff happening.
This is really strange.
Do you want me to rename? I can.
No. You can change
Yeah,
it if you
that's,
want.
that's fine.
Yeah, you can change it if you want. Are there any more William Baldridge?
Is William Baldridge even here?
Yeah, William Baldridge is here.
Okay, I was going to say he was here.
Yeah. No wonder. It's very strange because
Yeah, there he is.
I kept seeing a pop-up because I have a waiting room, and there were like multiple William Baldridges kept coming in. I'm like, is he like having problems with his connection or what the heck, you know? That is
Parallel universes?
Judge Brian, this is bizarre, right? Zoom is like crazy. All right, thanks. Okay, now we get that straightened out. If there's any more William Baldridges, you pop in, Brian. Just let me know. It's like who clearly are not William Baldridge. All right, Marlene, question. Yes.
Yes, no, what I was going to say is, you go to the market and you find something in your basket they didn't charge you for, and you need to go back in. I was in a hurry and I thought, oh, I don't have time to do this. And as I was going in, I said, am I doing this because this is how I feel? I feel like I want to be honest, or is it karma? Am I thinking, oh, I have to keep my karma good? And that really bothered me, that I thought, what if it's not coming really from my heart, but fear of punishment or dharma.
Right. Yeah, yeah, let's talk about that a little bit because that's a big one. That's a big one out there. The whole fear of punishment and rewards and all that stuff, right? So, bottom line is, I just go right to the bottom line first. The bottom line is there's no punishment and rewards out there in the universe in a structural way. What do I mean by structural? What I mean by that is there's no energy force or something that's somehow keeping some big, Chinese abacus in the sky, keeping track of who's doing what, keeping count and all that kind of stuff. There's no accounting system that happens energetically. That's not my experience. Now, are there consequences to our actions? Yes. Because can people remember stuff? Yes, we all remember stuff. And I argue that whether you intellectually, like on your surface of your mind, remember or don't, emotionally, it registers. If people hurt you, it registers. If people help you, it registers. There's no forgetting in that respect, is what I'm saying. So can somebody come back at you at some point? I'm not saying, somebody at the cash register at the store or something like that, but, whatever. Yeah, people don't forget. People don't forget if you hurt them or you help them, okay? Or anything in between. But you shouldn't be doing it, Marlene, for fear of punishment of some karmic thing in that cosmic kind of way. Is there karma in terms of consequences to our actions? Yes, in the way that I just said, in terms of other people remembering the good, bad, and the indifferent of whatever quality of action and behavior we had with them. Yeah, but nobody's keeping score. There's nobody and there's no thing that's keeping score. That was a concept that, according to, if you've watched the 30th November talk at 30thnovember.com, you can look it up, 30thnovember.com. That was a concept that was shared with us, the history of which was shared with us during that talk, that 10,000 years-ish ago, approximately 10,000 years ago, that this notion of karma and dharma, karma meaning action and dharma meaning duty, those are Sanskrit words. For those of you who don't know, those are Sanskrit words. It's one of the most ancient languages on planet Earth that comes out of what we now call India. And so out of what's called the Vedic tradition, and if you're not familiar with the Vedic, Vedic tradition, that's where Hinduism and Buddhism, and there's a Jainism, there's a bunch of isms that come out of that tradition of the Vedic tradition. It's ancient, many thousands of years old, at least 10,000 years old. So that's where this notion of karma came from. But why? Just to try to get people to start behaving a little bit less cruelly, quite frankly, to use the language we use in these sessions that I use, with less cruelty. Okay, that was the notion. But it was never presented by the originators of this idea of karma and dharma to mean like this ongoing thing for the rest of creation, or for the rest of eternity, that you're gonna have to live with and consequences from, et cetera, because of some system or some structural system that's keeping track of you. No, you may have to live with it for eternity in the minds of the other eternal mind that you may have hurt or helped or loved. So it could be positive, negative, or anything in between. So yeah, consequences in that way, but not in the way that you're worried about. No. Okay? You just muted yourself.
What bothered me is that if you're just doing it because you're a fear of punishment, then that's not really, that's not a good reason. I didn't feel like it was a good reason for me. Like it should be from your heart, not your morals or something, not because you're afraid.
Yeah, I agree with you. Let me comment on that. So why would somebody do something like that? Well, even for the reason of fear of punishment, What's the underlying reason that anybody would return the stuff for whatever reason, fear of punishment or not fear of punishment? They do it out of their own self-interest. Meaning what? Even fear of punishment derives the action may be fear of punishment, but the action is the basis of the action, the reason, the motivation. When I say basis, the motivation for the action is self-interest, to be happier. Because if you're going to get punished, you're not going to be happy about that. So it's really the underlying motivation is the pursuit of happiness. And there's nothing wrong with that. I would argue that that's why anybody does anything. Even a cruel, abusive person does it because that's what makes them happy. Now, is that, in my opinion, a messed up way to get happiness? Yeah. Okay. But their motivation is the same. And I think it's important to understand people's motivations, because if we understand motivations, we can avoid certain people who are going to exhibit bad behavior towards us. When I say bad, I mean hurtful. I don't mean evil in the sense of what we were talking about earlier. But there's bad behavior, there's hurtful behavior. There's a spectrum, right? What I was talking about earlier in my opening was there's no absolutes, but there's a spectrum. There's absolutely a spectrum, and we decide what's hurtful and what's not hurtful. Okay. And we are the judge of that. Not somebody up here is judging. We are each the judge of our own selves. And that's what you're doing right now, Marlene, which I applaud you for, because you are questioning yourself. I don't mean judgy meaning, like being obsessive, malicious at judging of yourself. I'm saying it's good to be self-reflective. That's what I meant when I say judge. You're being self-reflective, and you're self-assessing your thinking. Well, was that a good motivation for me? Bring back whatever you return to the store. Fear of punishment. No, I agree with you. But if we understand that all of our motivations to do anything really is the pursuit of happiness, then do it for that reason. Do it because it makes you happy to return the thing. Because why? Because in your morals, to use your word, Marlene, in your moral code, your ethical behavior, it was the right thing to do. That's what we should do things for. For our own inner compass reasons, our own moral compass reasons, right? Not because somebody at some institution told us we should, right? We should behave that way. That's what I'm going to get into that in the obedience talk when I talk about living more happily, because there's a whole cascade of really nasty things that a lot of people don't think about, because a lot of people think of obedience and devotion. They've been wired by institutions that think of obedience and devotion as a really positive thing, as a sign of a strong, strong human being. And I'm going to describe in great detail in that segment in June, the first Sunday in June, how that is really a mistake. Okay, how mistaken most people are in thinking of devotion and obedience as a virtue, right? But back to your point, Marlene, it's a really good point. Do it because you want to do it and you think it's the right thing to do. That's why you do it. Brian, yeah.
Yeah, I have to say I have a little bit of problem with your opening, that there's no such thing as good or evil. And you've explained it as we've gone along, but the problem I have is people don't sometimes people take that to an extreme and say there's no better or worse, which means therefore I can do anything I want because there is no moral code. And I know you've said that, you've I think clarified that, but I think I've seen people make that mistake. Well, if there's no absolute good or absolute evil, therefore, if I torture babies, that doesn't matter.
Well, but that's them twisting it. So
Yeah.
I made that very, very clear that
Yes.
That's clearly somebody who wants to manipulate. They want to manipulate concepts to meet their own social code. So social code, and from a spiritual standpoint, two different things. Because you can say that I want to follow a leader who has certain beliefs and a certain way that they lead. You can follow a leader who leads in a very autocratic way, a dictator kind of leader, and you could follow a leader who is more democratic. Let's just use those two extremes, okay? That doesn't mean that spiritually that somebody is pulling your strings and telling you as a puppeteer and controlling all of your actions. Those are two different things. Now, somebody could conflate those two concepts that I just stated, just like you are saying that some people could conflate those ideas, and they could say, no, 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 I believe that somebody is pulling the strings. They are a puppeteer of everything that we're doing, and this whole thing is just a, what's the word I've heard people use? This is like a matrix. This is like there's a phrase that starts with an S that I'm pulling a blank, but it's like it's all pre-designed.
Simulation.
There is no free will. It's just an illusion that you have free, right? And which which is, you know, we don't need to go down that road too far, but that's a conflation. So yeah, you're right. You're absolutely right. People can twist these things and make them into whatever pretzel they want to make, but it's still a pretzel. It's still a pretzel. They've twisted the stuff, you know?
Yeah. Yeah. Okay. Thank you.
Yeah, they've still made a pretzel. Okay, you know, yeah, you can do the pretzel. It's all right. It's your, and that also is your free will to do that. And is it wrong to do that? Well, in some circles, yeah, in some social circles, they would say you're absolutely wrong. You just did an evil thing by twisting that around. But you know, it's like that's easily turned on those people who say that. You know, because you know, is that evil? I don't know. In certain circles, I suppose it would be. But we can. That's the point. Is that it's relative, and instead of looking. So what's the choice? It goes to the next level here, Brian. What's the choice? What am I suggesting? I'm not suggesting that we don't have social codes of what is good and bad behavior and what's acceptable and unacceptable. I said that at the outset, right? We need to have that. But if we understand that there is no good and evil in this absolute way that I described, what do we need to do to live better? Because that's my whole focus of everything I do as a human race, is to think more clearly about what the choices we make. Because if there's no good and evil and there's only free will and then we have individual choices, let's make what I call better choices, meaning what? Meaning healthier, that less hurtful, that are kinder. Why is it better? It's better because of what Marlene is talking about, in my opinion, because a better choice for me to make, in my opinion, that makes me happier is a choice that makes other people happier and less unhappy. Why? Because I want to be around people who are happier. Now, that's me, Brian. That's not everybody. Some people want to be around people who are more miserable. That's a cruel, abusive person. That's the choice they make. They want that because their insecurity. Here's another William Baldridge coming in, by the way, if somebody.
Yeah, I don't know what all that's about.
Yeah, we're going to have an offline conversation between you and if there is a God. Anyway, I'm just joking.
I took my schizophrenia drugs. I don't know why I keep appearing all these places.
All right. I don't know who just came in as the second, as the fifth William Baldridge, but whoever it was, if they want to speak, they can change their name if they want to. Or they can, or actually, whoever that is who just came in should look on their screen and see if their name is the right name. And if it isn't, you can click on the upper left corner on those three dots and you can rename yourself your correct name. There's a Zoom glitch going on. Anyway, does that help, Brian?
It does, as I said, and I know what you meant by it. I have
Yes.
heard people use that in a
Yes.
way to say there is no good and evil, but I think there is relative better things and worse things.
Yes.
And an example I thought of as you were talking is slavery in this country. We had slavery here for over 400 years. And some people will say, well, at that time, slavery was okay because that's what they believed. I believe slavery is always wrong. I believe oppressing people is always wrong. I think that's an objective thing. Maybe I'm wrong, but I think it's an objective thing. And there is a relative scale of like, this is a better thing to do, and this is the worst thing to do.
Well, I think that I agree with your subjective assessment of slavery. That said, it has been historically, culturally, viewed differently through history. I mean, again, I'm not arguing for slavery, but it has not been viewed, slavery through history has not been viewed in the same way, and slaves were not treated even the same way as they were in the 1800s in the US
Right.
through history.
Right.
I mean, like in ancient Rome, for example, because you guys know I have some memories that go back then. Doctors, what we would call, and they were called doctors then, but what we would call nurses today, were teachers, not all teachers, and not all doctors, but most of the doctors and most of the teachers were slaves.
Mm-hmm.
They were they were not Roman citizens, and if you're not Roman citizen, then you were a slave. And now there were degrees of slavery even then within that culture, some of whom were like the slaves that we in America in the 1800s would call slaves. But others were considered slaves because they were not Roman citizens. They were slaves, right? And they were very much given responsibility for like children, et cetera, whatever. Healthcare, et cetera, was very largely the powered by, powered is the wrong word. There's a word, but anyway,
administered or delivered through something.
Yeah, delivered. That's the word. The healthcare delivery system was very much delivered through slaves in many of the Roman empires. So it just, I agree with you, but even that is somewhat relative if you think about it.
Yeah, yeah. It is relative. It's all relative, but they're better. There's things that are better and things that are worse.
Absolutely, the things are better and worse, and that's the whole slavery thing I have a problem with in a lot of levels. So yeah, I agree with you. Personally, I agree with you. But again, spiritually, people make choices, right? And whatever. And then look, I don't know how much you've dived into this, Brian, because you and I've had offline conversations, and I can't remember if I probably have said this to you several years ago, because you and I have been friends for a number of years now. But the prison system in the United States, you could argue, is a for-profit. I'm talking about the government prison system. Mm-hmm. There are for-profit elements within it that you could argue is slavery by paying somebody who, and I'm not sure if these organizations, I don't want to cast too many aspersions here, but I know that, Victoria's Secret, The Gap, I can't remember some of these other big, huge corporations have had for-profit multi-million dollar, hundreds of millions of dollars of agreements with government prisons in the United States to employ prisoners to do stitching work and different stuff. I don't know what all they were doing, maybe packaging, who knows what, but workers for $1 an hour, $1.25 an hour. So,
Yeah.
you know, yeah. And then one of the incentives I know was that the prison would not get this contract with these for-profit companies, these multi-million-dollar contract, unless their prisons were at least 92% occupied. So they had
Exactly.
a money incentive, a financial incentive to make sure their prisons were. And so where does that trickle down to? You know, trickles down to the local police force and everything. Who knows what else? I don't know.
Yeah.
It's pretty insidious. So you could say that slavery still exists in the United States in a bunch of ways. And a lot of people they're not even aware of this. I wasn't aware of it until George had that investigative reporter who wrote the book about this speak at the Commonwealth Club about 5, 6, 8, 10 years ago, whatever it was. Yeah.
Interesting. Yeah.
Yeah. Right. So, another William Baldridge entering the waiting room. Okay.
That's so weird.
It's so weird. I'll let you, Brian. I'll let you can chat with the person if you see them public, because I can't see everybody's name here, who's on. Other questions? Other questions? Anything else? Other questions? So think about other questions, and I'm going to read to you guys a question that I got from somebody here. Actually, Nick, are you here? Is Nick here? I thought I saw his name pop up. Nick, are you here?
I'm here.
Oh, do you want to ask your question? Do you remember what you wrote to me? What do you want me to read? Do you remember it?
I'd much rather you say it.
All right, okay. But anyway, this is from Nick. You just saw Nick pop up on your screen. This is from Nick. I understand the concept of Jesus and others being yogis. I understand angels and spirits, our minds going with us when we pass on this, after this lifetime and all that. He understands all that. However, who created us? Who created the angels, earth? Who is God? Is it source, as they say? Because you'll hear a lot of people who say in the spiritual groups, I've heard this many, many, many times. They'll say, well, I went to church, but I don't believe in all the stuff that the church, but then they'll use the word source. They'll talk about source instead of the word God, okay? That's what Nick meant when he said, is it source, as they say? And then he says, I know the light lives in me, and Nick is saying this. I know the light lives in me and others, but how did we get here? Is that pretty much it, Nick? Or do you want to add to it or subtract or anything?
No, that's good.
Yeah. So here's the thing. So that's like a gajillion-dollar question, Nick. But the way I look at it is this. All right? This is how I analyze that question. I would say, first of all, let's talk about the notion of creation, okay? Because that's inherent in what you're asking here, I think, right? Who created this and that and the earth, the angels, whatever. So if we're talking about, this is Kelvin Chin's theory, okay? If we're talking about creation of the universe and creation of us as part of the universe, then and if we follow the first law of thermodynamics, which it means energy cannot be created nor destroyed, and if we view us as energy, which that's how I view myself, so if you do, that's how I view myself. And I'm going to define myself in a second here. Obviously, it's not this biological body, but we'll come back to that. If I view myself as energy and you're Nick, you as energy, and everybody else here, Joe Rep, whose name looks like William Baldridge here, but I'm going to change it for you, Joe. So if we view each of us as energy, okay, and if we view this as energy, this pen, this, my books, by the way, my books, Afterlife book, Past Life book, Overcoming the Fear of Death book, and then you have the this book, Marcus Aurelius' updated collection of 67 essays, a lot of the ideas of which we're talking about today in these sessions and so forth. If you look at those books as energy, yes, it's a book, but it's really molecules, energy and so forth, atoms and subatomic particles that maybe don't even have names yet, whatever. As energy, and energy cannot be created nor destroyed, Nick, then there's no need for a creator of any of that. So let me check in with you, Nick, and before I continue. Does that make sense, or have I lost you? Because there's a bunch of parts to this.
No, it makes sense, but where
So
did the
far.
energy come from?
So far that makes sense, yeah? Okay?
Yes.
All right. Ask me if it doesn't. Anybody else can ask me if it doesn't. Now, so then the next line of thinking is, well, if that's the case, then there's no need for a creator of any of that, because it's not going to ever end and it never began. That's what eternity means. Okay? No beginning, no end. First law of thermodynamics, energy cannot be created nor destroyed. That's what that means. Now, sub-question, Nick. Who made us? All right. So now we have to define, what do you mean by us? So if I'm talking about I'll just use myself as an example. You can kind of transpose to yourself, obviously. But this is Kelvin Chin's biological body right now in 2020. What year is it? 2024. Is that a brain fart? 2024. Okay. This is my Kelvin Chin biological body now. It's not the biological body of the guy Richard from 1,000 years ago, and it's not the Buddhist monk body from 500 years ago, etc. Right? That I was. Okay. It's not the Carthaginian slave that I was 2,300 years ago. Different body, different name. So that's a human body, Nick. Could somebody have created that human body? At some point, both at the beginning of human history, maybe there's a beginning of human history. Is that possible? Yes. Some being or beings could have created that, just like you, and I don't know if you, Nick, but people, human beings, can take the genes of different dogs, and I don't know. I mean, Hazel, you know dogs and breeds and so forth, and Hazel could probably just give you a list of dog breeds right now that were a combination of different dogs, or maybe a combination of a wolf and a dog and a certain kind of dog, and it created a breed of dogs that we now call XYZ. Right? Right, Hazel? That's possible. So, Nick, this is a more complete answer to your question, Nick. So, could somebody have done that? And now we are humans. Yes, that could have happened, Nick. I'm conjecturing. I don't have an answer to that. I don't know if that happened, but I'm saying, yeah, that's theoretically possible and still logically possible. It's not cognitively dissonant, if you know what that means. It's not illogical, in other words. It's possible within the construct of all the concepts of free will and everything that you've heard me talk about. Are you still with me, Nick?
I'm with you.
That still makes sense?
Yes.
All right. Now, what about me? Now I've defined myself in that way, but there's also a me, Nick, that's not how I just defined it. There's an aspect of me. And I would call it, I sometimes call it in my afterlife classes, I call it the essential me. There's an essential me. It's the only phrase I can come up with. That's what I call my soul. Sometimes you'll hear me get a little loosey-goosey using the word soul, and I'll say our mind, our consciousness. But when I'm using the word soul, I really mean that essential me that's uninfluenced by the continuum of change. And those of you who have heard that phrase, me use that phrase before, uninfluenced by the continuum of change, know that that's what I call eternal. And in other words, no beginning, no end, so that uninfluenced by the continuum of change. And so that's where I view each of us having a soul that's uninfluenced by the continuum of change. Therefore, it's going to last forever. Therefore, to your question, Nick, no need for a creator. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
That's kind of the whole, that's the complete answer with all the different nuances, and that's the logic. Now, this is my theory, Nick. It's not an answerable question, really, is it? But it's interesting to look at, right? It's interesting to ponder. But here's the thing, Nick, and to everybody, I'm going to leave you with this, and we go into another question in a second. Hey, Hazel, I'm going to ask you about that dog breed thing in a sec, seriously. But before we go there, I want to leave you this one final thought on Nick's question. The last thought on Nick's question about this, who created us? Let's talk about the source idea. So the source idea also, Nick, people will use that phrase source, but doesn't that mean where things everything came from? I think is that how you're using it, Nick?
Yeah. Source, God,
Yeah.
all one. Same.
Right. So the source, that's what the word in English means. And so again, people will use that phrase. Again, to me, it logically makes no sense. You can't say things came from a source and now they're eternal. You see that in different religious institutions all the time, scriptural stuff. It's logically makes no sense. That's what I call spiritual gobbledygook. There's a lot of gobbledygook out there. So people will say source, oh yes, source, whatever. But they're real, and they'll claim that they're not Catholic, they're not Christian anymore, they're not Muslim, they're not this or whatever. They'll say they've given up on their religious institutions, but they'll use the same concepts. They just, I don't believe in God, like, sitting on a chair on a throne, but I believe in source. It's the same thing. Okay, you don't have the throne, okay, fine. All that. You don't have Mount Olympus, all that kind of stuff. Okay, fine. But it's the same. It's no different. All right, call a spade a spade. It's just they're just, they're using different terminology for basically the same concept. Source means the beginning. It means creator. It means somebody created the stuff. And see, if you believe that we are energy, and then energy cannot be created nor destroyed, then it's a conflation. You see that the confusion it's dissonant. It's two ideas that don't go together. So people will do that. All right. So does that answer your question about God, Nick? Ask me if not.
No, it clarifies things.
Yeah, the God thing, the God question. Because I think most people are thinking of God as omniscient, omnipotent, the creator, and all that. And maybe there is a God that created the human race. That's possible, or a being. Or maybe there's a race of beings, a group of beings, like in the movie Prometheus. I mean, I don't know. That could be. But our soul, in my opinion, logically, it makes sense to me that our soul transcends all that. It's uninfluenced by the field of change. And even if some beings created us and they came and destroyed the human race, our soul would continue and we could manifest elsewhere in physical form, not just on the other side. We could always exist on the other side in what we call a light body, not a non-biological form. But no, I think that the planet blows up, the human race gets wiped out. So I have no fear of any of that, not just the fear of death. I don't have any fear of continued existence. I think we are eternal. And that's what makes sense to me.
So do we choose?
Go ahead.
You choose to take on these individual lives for lessons?
Good question. So why do we take on these individual lives? Some people take them on to learn lessons. Some people just want to be here. So there's a huge range. In most of these schools, spiritual schools, you'll hear people say, oh yeah, we take on the lives to learn lessons. I think it's wishful thinking, and I mean this in a nice way. I mean this in a very respectful, nice way. I think it's wishful thinking on the part of some very well-meaning, and I mean this seriously, well-meaning spiritual people. Because these well-meaning spiritual people wish their hopes, dreams, and desires, we just call it, are that other people are like them trying to improve themselves. That's their hopes, dreams, and desires. But their hopes, dreams, and desires don't always match reality, do they? Every hope, dream, and desire that you have is my point. So I think it's a legitimate hope, dream, and desire. But I'm the realist here. I teach being acceptant of reality. Because if we don't accept reality, we set ourselves up for failure and disappointment. And that's all about unhappiness, and that leads to suffering. So I'm the anti-suffering, anti-anxiety guy. You guys know that. So I'm not saying that there are not people who come back to learn lessons and teach themselves and learn from their mistakes and their bad experiences. I do. And I'd say most or maybe all of you do. But if you look around planet Earth at the 8 billion people who you don't know, I would say that not everybody has their eyes open, paying attention. And if they're not paying attention, they're not really learning, right? You got to pay attention to learn. Hey, how many of you ever been to school? You ever been to school? You ever been to school and sat there spacing out, looking out the window like I did it a couple of times, Gail? Gail and I went to school together. You know, a couple of times Kelvin was spacing out. Yeah, maybe 2% of the time compared to some of the kids in the class who were spacing out 40% of the time. But I still spaced out, you know. And then you're not paying attention. How much are you learning when you're in the classroom? If you think of Earth as a classroom, which some people do, I don't think of it that way. I think it can be that way, but it's not. I mean, there's an essay in here. Those of you who've read this book, you know, there's an essay. I think the title of the book might be "Is Earth a Classroom?" or something like that, or Earth as a School or something. There's some essay in here about Earth as a School to Learn on page 244 of the Purple Book here. Yeah, so there's some people who believe, Nick, that Earth is a school, and you're sent here as punishment. To go back to Marlene's point about punishment, that this is a punishment thing. You got to come back here. No, you don't. You choose to come back here, and not everybody is learning. I'm sorry. I wish more people were learning. That's my hope. My hope, dream, and expectation is to inspire people to learn. Right? But it's their choice. It's their choice, as we've said. Right? Other questions? Does that help, Nick? Yeah. Peter Griggs.
It helps.
Does that help, Nick? I hope so. Yeah.
Yes, it does.
Feel free to come back at any other point. But yeah. So the other point I want to make here is that regardless of Nick's very deep and profound question about source and God and creation and all of that, which, as I said, is really an unanswerable question. I'm giving you my theory. What's the most important thing? The most important thing is how to live life, because we know we're here. So yes, it's interesting, and I don't mind going there, Nick. It's kind of curious. I'm curious too. Obviously, I've thought about that. But really, where's the rubber meet the road? The rubber meets the road in terms of how can we live better together individually and live better together on this planet, this rock that we find ourselves X planets from the sun, whatever. How can we live better together? That's the key. Thinking about these different concepts and so forth that we talk about, how can we apply them in a very pragmatic way, a very practical way to our daily lives, right? That's why when Brian brought up the thing about some people thinking, oh, there is an absolute good and evil because otherwise, blah, blah, blah. Yeah, I'm happy to go there and talk about the social guardrails and so forth. But let's talk about some of the underlying concepts that lead somebody down the road to cruelty to try to help them be less cruel. That's where I want to spend my time, not so much debating the good and evil concept, but let's talk about how, to Brian's point earlier, how can we shift our behavior and shift our by shifting our choices, by making different choices and decisions that lead us down a road as a human race that is less cruel, that is more kind, that is more loving and less hurtful, even negligently less hurtful. So that's something else I'm going to talk about in my Living More Happily, discussion group on the first Sunday of every month. That notion of where does intention and negligence come into play in our choices, and how can we make more conscious means intentional, right, versus subconscious bad choices, right, which is what that would be a negligent choice that somebody might make that's very hurtful to somebody but was not intentional. How can we make fewer of those? And nobody's going to be perfect, but how can we move more towards being more consciously healthy in our relationships with ourselves and others? Okay. Other questions? Anything else before we call it a session?
No, what were you going to say about dogs?
Oh, I was just asking you, like you're saying, dogs. I was talking about interbreeding, that we've done breeding of dogs. So I was just posing the concept earlier that could a being or set of beings have interbreeded and created humans? Yes, that's possible. It's possible. But again, that's above my pay grade of figuring out. And then I was just using you as an example of somebody who knows dogs that you could probably tell us, but whatever. That there's been interbreeding of dogs. And so it's possible that somebody, I was answering Nick's question earlier, that it's possible that somebody or some group of beings had created human beings. That's fine. That's certainly a possibility. But that still doesn't address what I think is the ultimate, really fundamental question of souls. And I think that souls, if they're energy, which I think they are, and they're uninfluenced by the continuum of change, have been around forever. I don't think there has been a creation of them. That's a difficult thing to wrap people's minds around. Okay. So anyway, that's why I said it's an unanswerable question. And the bottom line is, how do we work together to be living together in a healthier way? That's where I choose to spend my time.
with dogs, I know it's not comparable, but if you look at the way dogs used to be, they've
Mm.
completely changed the way they used to look by breeding. They're completely different. You know, they were healthier and they look different, their whole body, everything. And now they even interbreeding, as you say, which is even worse. But
So health-wise, it's compromised their health, huh?
yeah, yeah.
Interesting. Yeah. Yeah, that's interesting. Huh. That's a whole other sci-fi conjecture about the human race, isn't it?
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah, right. Is there a purer version of the human race before some possible hypothetical? This is just we're just riffing right now, interbreeding of humans. Yeah, who knows? Who knows? Who knows? Who knows? I don't want to go down that road too far because then we're going to get a bunch of conspiracy people, theorists in the group going down that road. Now, Joe, questions? Anything? Anybody have questions? You know how to mute yourself? You got to click there. You see that? Hold on. Click right there, Joe. There you go. See that?
There.
There you go.
It's my fault. I had trouble getting into the meeting, so I missed the first 40 minutes of it. And
That's okay. Just ask anything because it's if we've already talked about it, there's always going to be a different permutation of an answer. Go ahead.
yeah, there was one time, and I don't want to go into it now because you probably have another session for it. Oh, by the way, I finally got your books through Barnes and Noble. They didn't have them for a while, and then recently they finally showed up. So
That's
I,
weird because Barnes and Noble has had my books for years, and
yeah.
so it's very strange. Yeah,
Anyway, I was able to order them and get them
good,
finally. So
good.
good. I feel good about that. But I thought you had said sometime back before this monthly session about you were going to have a discussion group with about karma, and maybe Sharon was going to help you with that, like Wedge has helped you with, supported you in the past too. Is that something we'll come back to in time, or?
Well, we can do that, but we'll ask your question. Do you have a question specifically now? Go ahead, because we have some time.
No, but I'll get one.
All right, all right. Yeah,
Yeah,
yeah, yeah. You can bring one up if it surfaces. Feel free.
yeah.
Yeah. Any other questions, other folks? Oh, there you are, Brian.
I'll go back down the rabbit hole.
Yes, Nick. Go ahead. Yeah.
So some choose to learn, some choose to just be here. What is your take on spirit guides?
What about spirit guides? They
Do people come
exist.
to help you? Okay, that's what I'm saying. Or that's what I'm asking.
Yeah.
If
But
you choose to, you
go ahead. Go ahead.
so you chose to come into here as Kelvin Chin.
Yeah.
Were there people or souls that said, I'll be your spirit guide along with you?
Oh, I don't know of any spirit guides who have ever said that to me. I have lots of communication with beings on the other side, and I know that they throw me softballs sometimes, if you know what that phrase means. If people in other parts of the world, that just means they whisper sometimes to friends or to people I don't even know. Just to help make things happen more smoothly in my life. I know that happens, Nick. So I think you would call them spirit guides, right? Um, a Nobody has ever identified themselves to me as my spirit guide, if that's what you're asking. So, but I know that I have lots of guides, I guess, and And so where the way I think of spirit guides, and you tell me how you think of it, but I just think of any being on the other side who can be helpful. Are you thinking about it differently? Go ahead.
Well, both ways. You know, I feel that if you say that when we go to the other side, you still might be mad at somebody, and it's not just kosher on the other side sometimes. There's got to be people that are there to help you. Again, like drop that little hint in your mind or whatnot. I'm just wondering if there's actually people that go, all right, you're going down here. This is going to be a rough time, and I'm going to be there to help you.
Yeah, I think the short answer is yes. There's lots of beings who are helping, who are available to help us and can help us at any time. I think that's true, and that's been my experience, and that's been the experience of many people I know. Are they always there all the time? I don't think anybody is always there all the time. You know what I mean? It's like are they there when you want them? Sometimes yes, and sometimes no. I mean, it's true of anything on this side, because we're talking about minds, and so it's like people think, I think incorrectly, people think on this side, people think that beings on the other side, whether they're dead loved ones, friends, or dead anybody, or whether they're not prior, when I say dead loved ones, I mean they've been in a biological body before that died, and now they're on the other side. That's what I mean by dead in that way. But there are other beings over there who've never been in a biological body. Those are the beings I call angels and other beings like that. But they're all doing stuff. I think people incorrectly, to finish my sentence, I think people incorrectly think that the people are over there just waiting to be asked stuff. Oh, can you come down and help me, Kelvin? Where's Kelvin's request for us for today? It's not like but it's like they're doing stuff too. Every mind has the fundamental principle operating for them. In all of my research, you want to call it, my experience, on this side, that side, and all this past life memory stuff I got going back for thousands of years and all that, every mind is self-interested. And so to the extent, back to the point we talked about with Marlene earlier, so to the extent that the minds on the other side really enjoy helping you, Nick, they're going to be there for you. And now, might that get superseded, their desire and their love of helping you, Nick, might that get superseded by something that's happening in their life in heaven? Yeah. They get something else comes up and it gets superseded, right? Because why? Because their self-interest is involved in helping themselves be happy. Right? That's what I mean by self-interest. And their happiness meant that they had to go take care of a loved one on the other side who was concerned about something, instead of helping you find that parking space, Nick, that you were asking for.
I mean, I'll go for the lotto numbers if they want.
Say again?
I said I'll go with the lotto numbers if they want. Just give me those. We're fine.
Yeah, exactly, right? Exactly. Yeah. Anyway, Nick's not asking much. He's not asking for much, right, Nick?
No, just one time. One time, we're good.
One time, we're good. Exactly. No, but seriously, I think we need to think about the other side as very similar to this side in a lot of ways. It's different. There's light, we're light beings there, so everything's light and all that. And we can travel really fast and so forth. And the experience of time is different from the experience of time here. This is different. But I think if we think about it from a mental standpoint, if we think mentally, the mental construct of how a soul thinks and chooses stuff as being The same as how a mind or soul's a conscious mind chooses and decides on stuff on this side. I think a lot of these things will make more sense to us because that's my experience on the other side. You know, it's very similar in that respect, mentally, if you just look at it through that mental lens. It's not as mystical as people think. The ability to travel like really fast without a body and experience of time may feel weird at first, but then you get used to it over there. So then it's not weird at all, the experience of time. It's just the experience of time over there is what it is. And you forget what it's like here when you're over there for a while. Right? Right. So does that help, Nick?
No, helps a lot.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, I've had so many experiences of help from the other side. So when you talk about spirit guides, it's like I don't even think about it in that way anymore. I mean, I think of it as more like Brian has helped me on this side, Widge has helped me a lot, Hazel's helped me a lot. These are people I have a relationship with on this side. And for those people who are watching the recording, these are people who I'm looking at right now who are in the Zoom meeting right now with us. And they've helped me on this side. Do I consider Brian a spirit guide of mine or a Widge or whatever? You know, I mean, they're my friends and we help each other. Because why do you do that with a friend? Because it brings me happiness and it brings them happiness to help me. And it's in that way, I think we need to look at the spirit guides thing, you know, notion. I think more in that light. I think it's more of an accurate light, and I think it's more of that phrase that you sometimes hear me use it like more of looking at life and as an eternal democracy. It goes on forever. That's my theory anyway. There's a phrase that George came up with, my friend George Hammond. Life is an eternal democracy, you know? You know, like, and Brian said, yeah, you want to say that, Brian? Why don't you say that out loud so everybody can hear it?
Yeah, I think there's a mistake that spirit guides is like a job. Like they're assigned to us and it's something that they have to do. It's not like that. They're people, they are beings that are interested in us and want to help us, but they do it out of the goodness of their hearts, not because it's like an assignment.
Yeah, that's beautifully said. Thanks for saying it so well and so succinctly like that. Yeah, exactly. And so my whole thing, if you want to distill my view of, let's say, relationships in the universe that would promote promote less suffering and more happiness, which is say, is friendship. It's like friendship. And I have different levels of friendship with different friends and so forth and so on. And so it's not like all my friends are they're all like this, you know, the same, you know, so forth and so on. Everybody is different. I treat each individual individually. But my goal, you could say, or objective, I don't know what the right word is, you know, my desire is to be friends with people. Like, look, I met this guy yesterday when I was swimming at the local YMCA, and he's treading water in the deep end of the pool, and I jumped in, and we're not sitting there, we're swimming there, treading water together, talking. And then we talked afterwards in there, you know, and then I swam a bunch of laps, and then we met, saw each other in the locker room, and we chatted. I may never see the guy again. I don't know. His name's Bob. You know, but there was a friendship that was there. That's what I mean. I don't necessarily, when I say word friendship, I mean being friendly, I guess. But that's a friendship. It was a friendship that lasted, you know, off and on for 45 minutes or something. I don't know what. And I may never see the person again. I have relationships like that with an Uber driver or a cab driver, you know, over the years. To me, that's the type of perspective or approach to living life that I think would serve us all well. If we look at, like, okay, you can go to church and be a Catholic, devout Catholic, and go to church. I'm not a person who says people should give up, change their belief systems or their rituals and whatever they do. That said, going to talk to the priest, my recommendation would be to talk to the priest as your friend, not as your conduit to the slave owner that you view as God or whatever. You know what I mean? In other words, don't view God. If you view God, if you believe in God, again, I'm not here to change people's beliefs about this. This goes to your question, Nick, about what about God and all this. It's like, no, if you want to believe in God, that's fine. Don't view God as a slave owner that you have to be obedient to. That's what I talked about earlier, right? At the beginning of the session today. To me, that's a very unhealthy relationship, even if you believe in God, right? And I think that's kind of what Brian was succinctly saying in terms of the soul. The spirit guides, it's not a job that they got to do. Nobody's telling them that they got to do that. They're doing it because they're helping us and they want to help us. Did somebody else have something to say? Connection, Gail. You want to say something, Gail? Why don't you say something out loud? So you can.
I was just saying when you were saying like I made a friend at the Y, and of course it connected with me since I swim at the Y too. I feel like it's more of a connection. You're not really developing a friendship, you're making a connection, and you get a lot from that, whether you see them again or not.
Yeah, that's beautiful. So yeah, maybe friendship is too strong for some people.
It's different.
But connection, yeah, you're connecting with somebody. On some level, your soul connected with that other person's soul. That's a beautiful thing. And I think we need to look at life through that lens a little bit more, because I think it would bring about less animosity, less discord, if we start to view these touches that we have with other human beings as more an opportunity to connect or not, Now, that's not to say you want to connect with everybody. Somebody walking down the street wielding a 6-8-inch long knife, I don't want to be connecting with that person. It's like, see you later. So you use your common sense. But again, we're talking about this from a spiritual standpoint, in terms of how to improve the quality of our lives. Yeah, I think so. Connection is a good way. Thanks for sharing that word. Yeah. Anything else before we call it a session? It's good.
I think sometimes spirit guides or our loved ones on the other side bring people into our lives or us into their lives, and we make the connections. And in that sense, they're guiding us.
Yeah. Yeah, that's beautifully said, Marlene. I think that's true. And I've experienced that.
Yeah.
Oh, I experience that regularly, especially in the work that I do. I mean, people, they'll send me, for those people who don't know, maybe they're watching the recording, you can send me an email through any of my websites, kelvinchin.org, or any of the other I have 4 websites altogether, but go to kelvinchin.org. You can send me an email from the contact page and you can ask me anything about anything, any of the work that I do. And people will contact me and they'll tell me exactly what you said, Marlene, that they were guided to talk to me about whatever. Some people will just have a feeling that that's the case. Some people will have an explicit experience where they were visited and somebody told them that they should talk to me. So whatever. I mean, I think, and sometimes it's just a feeling. Sometimes it's very abstract. Sometimes it's not even on a level of a feeling. They just contact me. But I think there's a lot of that going on. Yeah. And yeah, I've leaned into that more. I used to be very skeptical of that 40 years ago, to be honest. I didn't believe in any of that stuff until I started having communications with the other side out of the blue. Yeah. No, that's beautiful, Molly. Thanks.
I'm sorry, Kelvin, I just
Yeah,
have to
sure.
I have to ask this. This is a
Yes.
strange question. I never thought about it before, but because of the discussion we had today, how do either the spirit guides or the loved ones that have passed over or whomever, angels, how do they guide us? In what way do they guide us? Is it through energy? Is it through a manipulation of some sort?
Well, it depends on the situation, right? I mean, I'll answer what I think is your question. You see if you come back and
Okay,
it's a sub question, okay? So, I mean, they can guide us through any means. It could be mental telepathy. I mean, I've had visitations where I see the being. It's come through me mental telepathy. I've done automatic writing in the past, decades ago, and so forth. That's something where people get literally, if you don't know what that is, you can sit with a pen and a paper. I've done that with pen and paper, or I've done it with a keyboard, and you just start typing, and it says, and the information is like coming from something not from your conscious, your immediately conscious mind. Or it could be, like you said, it could be some manipulation of something like, I jokingly said to Nick a few minutes ago about a parking spot, but that can happen. I've had that happen where it's clear to me that, I get this parking spot again. I get another parking spot right in front. I mean, it's happened to me so often where I get a parking front and it's the last parking spot. I get that. Not always, but I get it a lot. And is it every time? No. I mean, I'm not sitting there every time going, oh, that's another one of my angels or my spirit guides got me a parking spot. But it's happened so frequently for me at different times, in my lifetime that I think at least some of those times, and I don't know which ones of those, somebody's whispering. So to use your word, manipulating. Are they whispering? I call them whispers. Are they whispering to somebody to get off of their cell phone and stop texting right now and get out of the parking spot because I'm coming around the corner? Yeah, I think that does happen sometimes. Now, have I had the complete opposite experience sometimes, Sharon, where I'm sitting there waiting for a parking spot, waiting for somebody who just got in their car to stop texting and finally after 5 minutes get so frustrated that I leave and go. And so that where clearly nobody was whispering, or if they were whispering, it wasn't getting through. So there's that element too. I don't know. Does that help, Sharon?
It does. I think let's say that I have this day that is cram-packed with stuff. And I'm not sure I'm gonna make it on time to each one, but then something gets canceled so that I can make it to the next one on time, blah, blah, blah. It's like several different activities and it's synchronicity. And how does that occur? Does that occur because of my will, or is that, somebody intervening on my behalf to make it happen?
That's a great question. And did you notice what she said? She said, does that my will, or is that somebody else intervening? And so the short answer is only you can tell, depending on how clear your experience is. And so what I suggest that people do is to take credit for it and make it about your will, because even if you're what we were calling spirit guides before, based on the previous question, even if somebody on the other side is sending you the message, you still received it. And how many times, we don't know. This is a non-answerable question. But how many times have we been communicated with, each of us, all of you and me, where we didn't receive the message? Right? So take credit for the fact whether your mind, your own energy, your desire is energy too, right? Any kind of thought form is energy. Your desire to make your day, to use your example, or in my example, the parking spot, or in your example, to make your day easier, your energy sent out a telepathic is just energetic, right? Message to somebody, whatever, who canceled and, made your day easier, and they canceled and they moved to tomorrow or whatever. Take credit for that. That happens to me all the time.
I like that.
Yeah.
Yeah, I like
I suggest that that's the perspective to take.
that.
Why? Because it empowers you more.
Yes.
And it's all about, to me, our life, our happiness, the decrease, the reduction in our suffering is all about self-empowerment, really, if you want to distill it down to one thing. Taking ownership, and this comes back to Marlene's, question at the very, very beginning of the session today, taking ownership. That's, karma, consequences, taking ownership of our thoughts, actions, and our behavior, ownership of it. Well, it doesn't necessarily mean just from a negative standpoint, it's the positive stuff too. Take ownership of the positive stuff that will empower you more. And it's a self-fulfilling, it's kind of not, it's self-fulfilling, wrong word. It's a self-promoting, it's a positive snowballing effect. Being more, owning your power more makes you feel more confident, makes you feel more able to put out the desire for an easier day, or in the simplistic example I gave of a parking spot or whatever, and more likely to then create that positive snowballing effect of it happening. And that then becomes, in a sense, a self-fulfilling prophecy. Yeah. In a good way, right?
Thank you.
Yeah, welcome. It's a really good
Do
question.
you
Yeah.
do you think it also comes in dreams? Like, example, deja vu doesn't happen to me a lot, but it does happen to me. And whenever that happens, I just think to myself, I am where I need to be.
So what was the beginning? I missed the beginning, Nick. Sorry if you.
Do you think the guides or your energy, or however, when you have a dream like deja vu, is that just a solidification that you're on the path you should be? Like I said, I've had a couple, it doesn't happen often. It's not like but it does happen. And whenever it happens, I just think I am where I need to be.
Yeah, it's hard to say. I would, if you, my suggestion would be, it sounds like it's working for you. First of all, I'm a pragmatist and it works great. But my only added suggestion would be is have that thought and then, am I? I still have that thought. You know what I mean? Don't just blindly decide that, oh, it must be where I need to be, even though if I think about it, something's not making sense here, right?
Yep.
I would always have the common sense filter on. That would be my only subtle suggestion. But yeah, if that works for you, and deja vu is such a weird thing because it's like, it's impossible to explain, really. And there's so many different psychological, you hear psychologists talk about explanations about it. They have different explanations and so forth. Not all of which are fantasy either, but it's just, a delay in the synapse or whatever in the brain, whatever, and you actually did have the thought, but you didn't realize you had the thought. All of that doesn't really matter. What matters is what you do with it, as you're suggesting, Nick. And so that's fine. Yeah, that works. Yeah. Anything else? We call it a session? I think we're good. Good. Great to see everybody. See you next month. And thanks for being here, and thanks for all your commentary, your comments, your questions, and your interaction. It was great.
Cal, you will talk more about karma one time, won't you?
Yes, we'll talk more about that. Yeah.
Brilliant.
But think about your questions. Think about your questions about that between now and then. Okay?
Thank
All
you.
right.
Thanks, Kelvin. It was great.
Great. Thanks for being here, Brian. Take care, guys. We'll see you.
Thanks, Calvin.
Yep. Take care. Yeah.